Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Matt Tuna Turner and today we will be counting down the top 10 games from the N64. The N64. I remember fondly going to Toys R Us to pick one up. Black, with a see-through purple controller. Nintendo's third console and follow-up to the amazingly successful Super Nintendo, or Super Famicom depending on what area you're from. It also marks the first time Nintendo went with one unified console. There is no Famicom 64. The N64 came out in 1996 everywhere, except the EU and Australia. Sorry guys, you didn't get it till 97. Nintendo is going strong after beating Sega out during the 16-bit era, but this was no longer the 16-bit era. Sega had already released the Saturn, and Sony the PlayStation. Now is Nintendo's turn to enter the world of 3D and polygons. While the competitors went with CD-based systems, a popular format at the time, Nintendo stuck with cartridges, as they were harder to pirate. The N64 was also the first system to have 4 controller ports built right into the front, seemingly built with couch co-op in mind. This is evident with the massive amounts of multiplayer hits that came out for Nintendo's first fully 3D home console. Speaking of games, why don't we get into the list? Here are the top 10 games to grace the Nintendo 64. Coming in at number 10, we have Bomberman 64. While not the most innovative in terms of multiplayer changes from the Super Nintendo version, which I guess is a good thing, it did include quite an immersive single-player campaign, one that I played over and over and over again. So, not only can you play with your friends, but you can also play on your own. Rare made a lot of games for the N64, but none were as destructive as Blast Corps, which comes in at number 9. In Blast Corps, you were tasked with many different things. One was just to simply destroy a city so that a runaway nuke didn't crash into anything. You controlled trucks and giant mechs and just destroyed whatever was in your path. It was mindless, entertainment fun, and that is why we put it on this list. At number 8, we have Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. What was originally meant to be a bridge and part of a larger media launch for Star Wars between the events of Episode 5 and 6, this game was a single-player game where you controlled the character of Dash Rendar, who is seemingly close to Han Solo. You would traverse familiar Star Wars locations and even battle Boba Fett at one point in time. This game was hampered by janky controls, but the story was more than enough to overcome that. In the end, it was a lot of fun. Looks like we have back-to-back Star Wars titles, because at number 7 we have Star Wars Rogue Squadron. Rogue Squadron was more or less a flight sim that was skinned for Star Wars. You controlled X-Wings and Y-Wings and B-Wings. Rogue Squadron was the first of 3 games in the series and took place between the episodes of 4 and 5 primarily. You controlled Luke Skywalker as he takes control of Rogue Squadron. It is more or less like Star Fox, a rail shooter, but it is still packed with a lot of fun, and of course, it's Star Wars, so who doesn't love it? Speaking of Star Fox, this is a whole lot of star because our next entry is Star Fox 64. Those of you who are fans of the original Star Fox on the Super Nintendo will remember it was one of the first games to ever push polygon on a home console. Star Fox 64 took the familiar concept from the original Star Fox, and those of you who are lucky enough to have played Star Fox 2 on your Super Nintendo Classic or Super Famicom Classic will note that there are quite a few design choices that were from that in Star Fox 64. Again, Star Fox 64 is a rail shooter, and you go from planet to planet, lasering down enemies on your way to Andros. However, this one had a little bit more of a heart-wrenching story. That's what kept you involved. Not only that, but the fantastic 4-player multiplayer. Anyone else rage quit and destroy a few controllers playing this game? Coming in at number 5, we have Mario Kart 64. Mario Kart 64 was the second in the Mario Kart series. Mario Kart 64 was also the first game to have 4-player multiplayer in the series. Not only could you do 4-player multiplayer, you could also do multiplayer co-op if you wanted to beat those GP races with a friend. Personally, Mario Kart 64 is my least favorite in the series. However, it was quite innovative. Not only did it have arena battles, it also had race battles. And let's not forget, it also introduced the much-feared blue shell. Coming in at number 4, we have a multiplayer must for the system. It is GoldenEye 007. Based on the Pierce Brosnan movie of the same name, you basically go through the events of the movie. There are hidden things you could find, side quests, and also time challenges to complete. But that wasn't the real secret of this game. The real gem was in its 4-player multiplayer. This game became synonymous with multiplayer in that generation. Not only that, but it became a blueprint for console shooters moving forward. Alright, here we are, the final 3. Coming in at number 3, we have, probably to nobody's surprise, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask was a Zelda-inspired spin on Groundhog Day. You essentially lived the same few hours over and over again while still completing temples and quests. This game marked a break from the familiar Zelda format, one that at first fans didn't really like. However, as time has gone on, it has become a certified classic. At number 2, we have the N64 launch title, Mario 64. It was the first game that marked the beginning of the 3D platformer genre. The controls were tight, the level design was fantastic, the enemies were fun, the story was great, and there was always a race to complete all 120 stars. Mario 64 became the standard for 3D platforms moving forward and has since inspired games like Super Mario Sunshine, Super Mario Galaxy, and the most recent release, Super Mario Odyssey. Without Mario 64, those games would probably not exist. Alright, we've come to our number 1 spot, but just before we get there, let's go back over the list. At 10, Bomberman 64. Number 9, Blast Corps. 8, Star Wars, Shadows of the Empire. 7, Star Wars, Rogue Squadron. 6, Star Fox 64. That's a whole lot of star. At number 5, we have Mario Kart 64, followed by another multiplayer must, GoldenEye 007 at 4. 3, Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, and number 2, Super Mario 64. Now, at number 1, we have the game to rule them all for the N64, and that was Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time was the first 3D Zelda game in the series. It built on what we learned from the original Legend of Zelda as well as A Link to the Past and created a whole new experience that was actually surrounding music, which was quite an interesting twist. Not only was music the central focus of this game, so was time. You could time travel as young Link to adult Link and back. And this became important when you had to complete certain temples. This game was also incredibly difficult and somewhat unforgiving. I'm looking at you, Water Temple. Before I sign off for today, let's run through a few honorable mentions. These games I really wanted to put on the list, but sadly there just wasn't enough room. There are too many good games for the N64. Perhaps the N64 Mini will include all of these. One can hope. That's assuming the N64 Mini is coming. Again, fingers crossed. Today's first honorable mention is Donkey Kong Country 64. Again, a 3D platforming game based on the 2D platformer Donkey Kong Country. This game was special because it included the expansion pack, which was basically a ROM expansion so that the N64 could have a little extra oomph to run these games. Speaking of needing a little extra oomph, our next honorable mention is Perfect Dark, another game that used the N64 expansion pack. Very similar and from the same developers as GoldenEye. We have a space shooter instead of James Bond. Perfect Dark is on the honorable mentions list because GoldenEye, in my opinion, was the better shooter. Moving on, we have another Star Wars title. Man, Star Wars and N64 seem to have gone hand in hand. This one is the Episode 1 Racer. If you ever wanted to feel the rush of pod racing through the Boonta Eve race course, this was your chance. Also, you should note that this was just remastered for the PC, so if you missed it the first time around, looking at you, all you young kids, pick it up again. It's a blast. Our last honorable mention is another shooter in the form of Turok the Dinosaur Hunter. This is put in the honorable mention list just because it had fairly janky controls and it hasn't really held up quite as well as you would have remembered it. There is some definitely rose-tinted glasses going on here. If you ever wanted to shoot a Tyrannosaurus Rex with a bow and arrow though, this was your game. Alright, that's it. That's your top 10 N64 games of all time. Hopefully you enjoyed. Do you have any games you would have added to this list? Let me know in the comments below.